Today we're talking about user experience, and like every good presenter putting together a deck and talking about a term, the first thing I do is go to Wikipedia and say, what's that say? So user experience is how a user interacts with and experiences a product, system, or service. It includes the person's perception of utility, ease of use, and efficiency. So with that as a kind of frame for what we're talking about in terms of the topic and what do we mean by UX, what is it actually when we think about the Kubernetes user experience that comes to mind? And particularly, I'm thinking not so much, maybe many of you might be very experienced with Kubernetes and probably pretty proficient with YAML. But if you're a new user, you're a student being told, go learn Kubernetes, you've just come into a new department, haven't used it before, what's that learning curve look like? Well, you know, my first thought when I want to go and try a new thing is I'm going to do apt-get, or if I'm on a Mac, I'm going to do brew install, and you know, you can try this. I tried it, it doesn't work. Apparently, it's harder than installing an app. Who knew? You don't simply just start using Kubernetes. There's things you have to go learn before you can even get started. So, of course, first thing I'm going to do is go to Kubernetes.io, look at the documentation. And this is not a ding at the documentation. Kubernetes documentation generally is great, but it's still complicated, right? Do I want to understand Kubernetes or try it? Or do I want to set up a cluster? Like, I just want to get started, right? So I'm going to click on Getting Started, because that's probably the most obvious one as a new user. So I've got a whole load of things I have to learn. So I can download it. There's a link there. But it says, to get started, I need to try, it suggests I try this thing called Minikube. Okay, now that's going to lead me out to a whole different thing. I thought I wanted Kubernetes, but now I've got Minikube. That's a different website. And that's got a whole load of prerequisites as well. Like, I need a container or virtual machine manager, like Docker or QEMU. And okay, so assume that I've got all of those things, and that isn't too big a leap for me. I can install it, and I can do Minikube start, and I can start my cluster. And now I can interact with it. I can do kubectl, and it suggests I do Minikube dashboard. So I'm going to go to type Minikube dashboard, and I get something like, I'm going to scroll up to the top. So, okay, well, there's a whole lot here. It's actually pretty intimidating because everything is shown down the left-hand side. And it's also a fairly kind of static experience in that I can view what's going on, but there isn't a whole lot I can do to actually interact with the cluster to create deployments. I think there is something where I can, I can apply a YAML basically, which doesn't do a whole lot for me as a new user. So lots to do there. And then I can start to deploy applications. So as I said, there's nothing really in the dashboard to help me do this. So I have to do this kubectl create deployment, a whole lot to learn there at the command line. So as a new user, I simply have to install Kubernetes with kubeadm or Minikube or something else, install kubectl locally. I have to remember to set up my kubeconfig. I think I jumped over that. Enable the dashboard, apply some random YAML file that I got from somewhere, and now I'm ready to start with Kubernetes. Security. Because now I've just set up something that's potentially a huge, attractive surface area for all the attackers out there. And now I have to start learning about role-based access control and service accounts and all of these things, and passing a token into the dashboard. Oh, this is getting pretty complicated. And I'm still only talking about Kubernetes. We're talking about the cloud-native user experience here, right? All sorts of different projects. And back in 2018 in the CNCF, I remember working with Dan Cohn, and he came up with this idea of the trail map. And we want to provide a paved experience for users. And, suggested path, but no one's using all 16 of the CNCF projects as part of their enterprise computing stack. Well, how did that go? I think we all know how that went. That 16 is now hundreds, and it's become a meme, and everyone puts up this meme when they talk about the landscape. But seriously, this is a challenge for folks, right? But there's a lot of good to this, right? Choice is good. We like to make a lot of things available. there is actually a lot of consistency among all of these projects. So we have some design patterns that have kind of got replicated across many of them. And there are good reasons for having standalone user experience for each of these projects, right? It allows them to focus, it allows them to create an experience that's appropriate to that project. But you do get fragmentation of experience, which doesn't help this learning curve, which is steep enough already. It creates context switching between going to the UI for this thing and versus the UI for that thing, and you've got inconsistency across all of these UIs. So, so we end up not really being helped a lot by all of this inconsistency. And this is where the managed services would step up. And yes, I work for Microsoft, and I'll tell you AKS is the best one, and you should go use that. And it's great, and it solves a lot of these problems and packages a lot of the things together. But I kind of feel like as a community, this is a problem we should be solving. We shouldn't just be saying, you have to go use XYZ managed service. You should be able to, off the shelf, have a much better experience, vendor neutral, cloud native, out-of-the-box experience. So this is what we're trying to do with Headlamp. Headlamp's a rich, modern user interface, so we're trying to make it very dynamic, very responsive. It's in the CNCF, so it has that vendor-neutral stamp. A lot of folks now starting to participate, building plugins and things like that. And it's multi-cluster, so unlike Dashboard, where you were looking at a single cluster, here you actually can start to look across multiple clusters. And it works with any Kubernetes distro out of the box, right? So if it's CNCF compliant, it's going to work with Headlamp. It also, importantly, has both a web and a desktop experience. So if you want an app, so for a lot of users, that's a nice way to get started. Or if you want to start with a web UI, which is a great way to build kind of a custom portal that you can point users to as well. So we see people doing both. And crucially, it's extensible and very, very flexible in its extensibility. So it's super easy to build plugins and make those integrate into various parts of the UI. So pretty much anywhere there's a UI component, you can add columns, you can add buttons, you can, as here, can change the logo. That's a very small modification, but you can go through to really huge modifications as well. So I'm just going to show you the UI just so you get a little bit of a feel for it. So this is the home screen. We get our list of clusters that we're connected to. You can see I've got a couple here. CDS test, very imaginatively named. So I get some overall statistics. I can see my nodes and my namespaces, and I can go into my workloads. I've got storage, a whole load of stuff for networking. And in fact, if I go into storage under pods, if I want to go and view a pod, I have Prometheus metrics actually integrated here, so I can see what was my memory consumption over time, what's it been doing with the file system, all of those kind of things. So a lot of really nice capabilities actually. I realize this is quite small, so you can just about see it. It's pretty high resolution. Yeah, so that's the UI. The other thing you'll see here is we have an apps catalog. So this actually connects into the CNCF artifact hub and pulls down Helm charts that are there. So if things are listed in Artifact Hub, you can list them here. So if I want to install Redis, there's a whole bunch of those. I can install that and just add in a couple of options. So which namespace do I want it in? I want to pull the latest version, give it a description, install it. Now, yeah, I can scroll down and see all the Helm chart there if I want, but I've installed it and that's there and it's successful. And if I go up and I see my pods, okay, it's doing container creating. That'll hopefully switch to running pretty soon. But you can see that as an experience, that's so much easier than I think than what we went through trying to start from documentation as a new user. So this is the vision here. What we're trying to work towards is Headlamp not really just to be a basic Kubernetes UI, but be the accessible UX for learning and operating the whole ecosystem of CNCF tools. Ideally, all of the tools that people would want would have apps created and have plugins. It's super easy to deploy. You can install it whichever way you prefer. The desktop app, one of the things that we're working on, I'll just show you this quickly, is we have it integrated with Minikube. So you can actually run these locally. Oops, sorry. When I go to my list here, I can add a new cluster. I'm very imaginative. I'll call it CDS Test 2. And it'll create that Minikube cluster and bring it in. That just takes a few seconds, but so you can see the kind of the learning curve there is much easier for that. I showed you the app catalog. We also have a plugin catalog. So if you create a plugin for Headlamp, you can publish that to Artifact Hub, and that'll get listed in the Headlamp UI as well. An example of these, we just did an open cost plugin. So we have this inserts. I mentioned it could insert a column. It inserts a cost column. So on your pods, you can see how much it's costing you. It integrates with Prometheus, so you can see the cost over time. And we're working on an AI plugin where it's basically like a ChatGPT integration. You can go in there and ask it query the AI about what's happening in your cluster. So that's a very quick whirlwind tour of Headlamp. Lots more we could happy to share it or talk about in Q&A, but I'd love the feedback. We do want to spread the word here because it's going to take a village of all of us working to build these plugins and make Headlamp, use the extensibility of Headlamp to make the cloud-native ecosystem more accessible and have a better user experience for everyone. We have language translations in there. I think we have Portuguese and Spanish and English and German, maybe French. But if you know languages that aren't there, please add one. That's Headlamp. Try it out. All the links there. And the team's available on Slack in the Kubernetes Slack. So, thank you.
All right, that was a whirlwind tour. Okay, and we have a couple of questions, so that's cool. First question is, how does Headlamp handle role-based access control and authentication?
Yeah, so Headlamp has the user's context, so and that's actually how it does differ from some dashboards where it has a service account, so it has full visibility and rights into the cluster. With Headlamp, you can only do what you can do as a user. So you basically have it'll access your kube config, and you basically log in as a user.
Cool. As a follow-up question, and also maybe a little bit of a stab at AKS, does Headlamp support users who got access to specific namespaces, unlike AKS?
I'm not sure what the stab is at there. So as I said, the app has the rights and visibility that you as a user have. So if your user doesn't have access to a namespace, it won't see the namespace there. And if you do have access to the namespace, it'll see the namespace.
Right. Is it possible to connect my own artifacts registry?
I would think so. I don't know. That's a good question.
Answer TBD at a later point. Okay, cool. All right.
I would think it's probably not hard coded to the CNCF one, but it's I don't want to give a definitive answer there.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, it is recorded, Does Headlamp try and achieve a certain web accessibility standard?
Yes. So we actually do put a lot of emphasis on accessibility. I'm not sure that we have a specific public standard. We haven't. Most of the team is in Microsoft, and we have Microsoft accessibility standards, so we do go through those.
Great. All right, last question. Great. Is it possible to deactivate the AI assistant and/or plugin catalog?
Yeah, all plugins can be deactivated. You can customize it to remove, show whatever you want. yeah.
Perfect answer. All right. Well, then we're out of questions. Thank you so much for sharing this with us today.
Okay.
And let's do one more round of applause for Andy.
Thank you, everyone.